Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going on a deep dive into Murano glass pheasants.
Oh, those are lovely.
They are. They're those colorful birds you might have seen, at an antique store or even your grandmother's mantle.
Mm.
And we found this super interesting article on Jewelry Bubble.
Mm.
They're a website for vintage collectors. And it's really targeted towards collectors. But we're going to pull out the most interesting parts, even if you've never seen these before.
Sounds good.
So yeah, get ready to learn why these birds are more than just a pretty decoration.
Mm.
They're really steeped in history and symbolism.
I love that.
Yeah, and they can even have some serious investment potential.
Oh, wow.
So let's start off with the basics. What exactly are Murano glass pheasants?
Well, they're these amazing hand-blown glass sculptures.
Okay.
And they come from Murano. You know that little Venetian island that's super famous for its glassmaking?
Right, yeah.
They're so vibrant and full of color, often with gold leaf accents. And they have these whimsical tail feathers that just make them so charming.
I love the tail feathers.
Me too.
And the article mentioned that Murano glassmaking goes back centuries.
Yeah.
But when did these pheasants first appear?
Yeah, so they really took off in the 1920s. It's like the maestri, the Murano glassmakers, took their centuries-old techniques and gave them a modern twist. You know, like those Renaissance vibes with all the detail and vibrant colors.
Oh, so they're like tiny pieces of art history.
Exactly.
I like that. And the article talked about how they often have gold leaf accents and these really beautiful tail feathers.
Oh, and don't forget about the symbolism.
Oh, right, yeah.
Pheasants have always been associated with abundance and beauty in tons of different cultures. So it makes sense why they were popular gifts and became these treasured family heirlooms.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, these birds have also become pretty popular with collectors.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And the article said they can be super rare, especially ones from the mid-century that used complicated techniques like summer sew. Can you explain what summer sew is?
Oh, summer sew is amazing. It's where they layer different colors of molten glass on top of each other. So, like, imagine dipping a piece of clear glass into ruby red
Okay.
and then layering that with sapphire blue.
Oh, wow.
When it cools, you get this incredible depth of color, like looking through stained glass. It's not easy to do, though, which is why summer sew pieces are so sought after.
It sounds gorgeous. And the article also mentioned that the value of these pheasants is actually going up. Some
Wow.
auction houses have even seen prices for signed pieces jump by like 30%.
That's right. Actually, Jewelry Bubble shared a story about one of their clients who inherited a Murano pheasant from the 1950s. They got the maker's signature authenticated and ended up selling it for 3 times its appraised value.
Oh, wow. That's a great return. So how can you tell if a Murano glass pheasant is the real deal?
Well, the article gives this handy 3-step checklist that's really helpful. First, you want to check the base for pontil marks.
Those are the rust spots from the glass blowing rod, right?
You got it. And sometimes you'll find etched signatures on the base too, like Murano Italia.
Okay.
Then you really want to look at the colors. Real Murano glass has those rich layered hues we talked about. Fakes will often look kind of flat or overly glossy.
Gotcha.
And lastly, there's the weight test. Real Murano glass feels heavier because the glass is denser.
Yeah, the article mentioned that. And, speaking of those little details, remember how the Jewelry Bubble website had those 2 vintage pheasants? And they pointed out the subtle bubbles and the asymmetrical tails. They said that's a sign of handcrafted work.
Exactly. Those tiny imperfections are actually what makes them so charming and valuable.
It really sets them apart from those mass-produced imitations. So now let's talk about how to take care of these delicate pieces. What did the article recommend?
Well, it's all about simple but regular care. Like just dusting it gently with a microfiber cloth is usually enough.
Okay.
And definitely avoid any harsh chemicals because they can damage the glass.
Right.
And also try not to display it in direct sunlight.
Right, because that can fade the colors over time. Was there anything else?
Yeah, the Jewelry Bubble folks recommend rotating the piece every year. That way it wears evenly and helps keep the colors vibrant.
That's a great tip. It'll help it age gracefully.
And speaking of aging gracefully, they featured this stunning vintage swan figurine in the article, too. It's from the 50s or 60s, this beautiful teal color with blue and gold accents, all encased in clear glass. And get this, it still has its original red foil sticker that says, "Genuine Venetian glass, made in Murano, Italy."
Oh, I love those little details. It's like holding a piece of history.
Isn't it? It connects us right back to where it was made.
Okay, so we've talked about why these Murano glass pheasants are so cool. But where can our listener find authentic pieces? The article mentioned prices are going up, so there's bound to be some fakes out there.
That's true. The article recommended checking out Jewelry Bubble's curated collection. They specialize in genuine vintage Murano glass, so you can be sure you're not getting a fake. And they seem really passionate about these pieces. Their expertise really shows in the article. They clearly want to help collectors learn and make informed decisions.
That's awesome. What surprised you the most about the advice they gave on caring for these pieces?
Honestly, it's how simple it is. They emphasize that you don't need any fancy equipment or expensive cleaners to keep your Murano glass looking great. Just a little care and attention can go a long way in preserving these treasures.
So what's the takeaway for our listener?
Think of this deep dive as your introduction to the amazing world of Murano glass. We've talked about the history, the symbolism, their value, and even how to spot an authentic piece. Now you have the knowledge to start your own collection.
Yeah, maybe you'll find a hidden gem at an antique shop or rediscover a family heirloom you already have. Either way, you now know so much more about the artistry and craftsmanship of these birds.
They're more than just decorations. They're a real testament to human creativity and the enduring power of beauty. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one telling the story of how you found that rare, one-of-a-kind Murano glass pheasant. Like the jewelry bubble team said. Murano glass pheasants are vibrant fragments of artistry, tradition, and enduring investment value.
I love that. They really do bridge the gap between exquisite craftsmanship and symbolic storytelling, making them timeless centerpieces for collectors, designers, and really anybody who loves art.
Exactly. And that's why we love doing these deep dives with you. It's about opening up new worlds, sparking curiosity, and maybe even inspiring a new passion.
So if you're intrigued by Murano glass, definitely check out the Jewelry Bubble website. They have a stunning collection of genuine vintage pieces just waiting to be discovered.
But before we move on, here's something to ponder. Now that you know how to identify authentic Murano glass, what other Murano glass animals might be out there, waiting to be unearthed?
Ooh, good question. Maybe flocks of glass birds or schools of shimmering fish or even a pride of majestic lions, all made with the same skill and artistry. It's like the Jewelry Bubble team said, Murano glass is a journey of discovery, a constant exploration of beauty and history. Just be careful, you might fall down a rabbit hole of colorful creatures and dazzling designs.
I know I have. I recently picked up a small Murano glass owl, but that's a story for another deep dive.
Ooh, you're killing me. All right, our listeners will just have to wait for that story.
It's fascinating how these Murano glass pieces, you just want to keep learning more about them.
Totally.
Once you start looking, there's like a whole world of these animal figurines.
It is kind of like that, and that's what's so fun about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We start with one thing and end up down this rabbit hole of information. But speaking of learning more, I'm really curious about the history of Murano glassmaking. The article touched on it a little, but I'd love to know more. Like, how did this whole art form even get started?
Oh, it's an amazing story. It goes all the way back to the 13th century. Just picture Venice at its peak, right? Like a major hub for trade. And Venetian merchants, they're bringing back all these exotic materials and ideas from the East.
I can only imagine the creativity that was sparking.
Exactly. And one of those ideas was glassmaking. It was already super advanced in places like Syria and Egypt.
Okay.
And the Venetian Republic, they saw the potential, so they decided to move all the glassmaking furnaces to this island, Murano.
Was that because of fire? I vaguely remember something about the furnaces being a fire hazard.
Oh, yeah, that was definitely part of it. Back then, they used open furnaces, so the risk of fire spreading through Venice, it was a huge concern. But there was another reason, too, more strategic. They wanted to keep the secrets of glassmaking safe.
Ah, okay. So by keeping the glassmakers on Murano, they could control the production.
Right, and keep those techniques from getting out.
Clever. And it worked, right?
Totally. Murano became the place for glassmaking in Europe. Like, they were known for the best quality and the most artistic glass. The maestri, they developed all these innovative techniques like, the summerso we talked about earlier. And everyone wanted their creations, from royalty to the super rich.
It's wild how they managed to keep those secrets for so long.
They were serious about it.
Yeah.
For centuries, glassmakers weren't allowed to leave Murano. Like, it was punishable by death. They even got special privileges, like their daughters could marry into Venetian nobility, which was unheard of back then.
Wow, they were highly valued.
Yeah, they were. And it's amazing to see how that legacy of craftsmanship is still alive today. I mean, look at those gorgeous pieces from the Jewelry Bubble article.
They really are beautiful. So does all that history add to their value for collectors? I mean, knowing they're connected to all that tradition.
Oh, absolutely. A Murano glass pheasant isn't just a pretty object.
Hmm.
It's like a piece of history you can hold in your hand. All that tradition, the innovation, the incredible skill. Understanding the stories behind them just makes you appreciate them even more. And yeah, it often increases their value too.
I guess it's like with any collectible, the more you know, the better.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of curious about the pheasants themselves. Why pheasants? What's the cultural significance there? Why were they chosen for these sculptures?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, we mentioned before how pheasants have always had symbolic meanings in different cultures. Like in ancient China, they were linked to the imperial court, symbolizing beauty, prosperity, good fortune.
Okay, so there's like an auspicious energy around them.
Exactly. And in European folklore, they were often seen as messengers from the gods, representing light, renewal, even resurrection.
Do you think the maestries were thinking about those meanings when they made these pheasants?
I mean, it's possible, right? They were definitely immersed in the culture and traditions of their time.
True.
It's cool to think about how those layers of meaning, both cultural and historical, are kind of built into these objects.
Hmm. It reminds me of how the article talked about the versatility of these pieces, how they can fit into both modern and traditional settings. They're not just beautiful, they can tell a story, start a conversation, almost transport you to another time.
Totally. And speaking of stories, the article mentioned something about specific makers and their signatures.
Oh, yeah. We talked about authenticating pieces, but we haven't really talked about the makers. What should our listener know about identifying them?
Sure.
Is it like paintings where certain artists are more valuable?
Definitely. Like with any art form, there are Murano glassmakers whose work is just more sought after by collectors.
Yeah.
Names like Archimedes Seguso, Alfredo Barbini, the Fratelli Toso brothers.
Okay.
Their pieces can go for a lot more at auction, not just because they're well made, but because of their place in history.
So how can you tell who made a piece? Is it just the signature?
Signatures are a big clue, yeah, but it's
Okay.
more than that. Over time, different makers develop their own style, like their techniques, favorite colors, even the type of glass they like to use.
So you start to recognize their signature, like with any artist.
Exactly. Archimedes Seguso, for instance, he was known for super delicate and intricate work, lots of filigree and fine details. But Alfredo Barbini, he loved bold shapes and vibrant colors.
Interesting.
And the Toso brothers, they were famous for using Zanfirico glass. It's where they create these patterns of colored threads inside the glass.
Yeah.
Super complex.
Wow, you can really see the skill and dedication there. But I bet it's hard for a new collector to tell those subtle differences.
It can be. Yeah. But that's where research comes in. There are books, websites, even expert appraisers who can help you learn to identify the work of different makers. The more you learn, the more you'll start to notice those nuances.
I like that analogy, like learning a new language. Once you know the basics, you can appreciate the poetry.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about pheasants, but what other kinds of animals do they make out of glass?
Oh my gosh, so many. You can find everything from birds and swans to fish, dolphins, even lions and horses.
Wow, a whole menagerie.
And they're all done in that vibrant, luminous glass. Each one tells a story, not just about the animal, but about the artisan who made it.
I love that. I'm imagining someone's house just filled with all these creatures, each one unique. Now, the article also mentioned the investment potential of Murano glass. What advice would you give to someone thinking about buying these as an investment?
Well, that's a great question. It's important to remember that the art market, just like any market, it can go up and down.
So it's not like stocks, where you can see the value every day.
Right. But like with any investment, knowledge is power. Do your research. Learn about the different makers, styles, techniques. Look for pieces in good condition, ideally with a signature. And if you're going to spend a lot, talk to an expert appraiser first.
That makes sense. An appraiser can verify it's authentic, see what condition it's in, give you an idea of what it's worth.
Exactly. They can also tell you about the history of the piece and how much it might appreciate in value over time.
So it sounds like collecting Murano glass can be a fun hobby and a good investment.
It really can be. But even more than that, it's a way to connect with history, artistry, a craft that's been around for centuries. It reminds us that beauty can be found in unexpected places. And sometimes the most valuable things are the ones that bring us joy and wonder.
I love that. Speaking of joy and wonder, do you have any Murano glass pieces? Any that are special to you?
You know what? I do, and that's a story I'd love to tell. But maybe we should save it for another deep dive.
Oh, come on. You can't leave us hanging like that. All right, fine. Our listeners will just have to wait for that story. All right, I think we've covered just about everything on these Murano glass pheasants. But before we wrap up, you got to tell us about that Murano glass owl you mentioned.
Oh, right.
I'm dying to hear about it. Spill the beans.
Okay. So it was a few months ago. I was at this antique market, just browsing, not really looking for anything in particular.
I love those days.
Yeah, you just kind of let yourself wander and see what catches your eye.
Totally. It's like a treasure hunt.
Exactly. And that's what happened. In this dusty little booth, tucked away in a corner, I spotted this owl figurine. It wasn't as big as the pheasants we've been talking about, maybe 4 or 5 inches tall, but something about it just drew me in.
What was it that stood out to you?
The eyes. They were this incredible amber glass, almost like honey, and they had this sparkle, like an inner light.
Ooh, I love that.
And the way the artist sculpted the face, it was so wise, so knowing, it was just mesmerizing.
Sounds like you found a real gem. Did you know right away it was Murano glass?
I had a feeling, but I wanted to be sure. So first, I checked the base. And yep, there it was, a pontil mark. A little rough, just like the article described.
Nice.
Then I looked at the colors. It was this gorgeous mix of browns and grays with little hints of blue and green, all blended together with that signature Murano depth and richness.
Yeah, those subtle color variations are so beautiful. It's not just the colors themselves, it's how they seem to change in different light.
Totally. And this owl, it had that in spades. Of course, the last test was the weight. And even though it was small, it had this surprising weight to it. You could tell the glass was really dense.
It sounds like you went through the whole authenticity checklist. Did you figure out who made it?
No signature, unfortunately, but based on the style and how it was made, I'd guess it's from the mid-20th century, maybe the 50s or 60s.
That was such an innovative time for Murano glass. They were experimenting with all sorts of new techniques.
And this owl, it feels like it embodies that creative spirit. It's not just a copy of an owl. It's like the artist's interpretation, capturing the essence of the creature in this beautiful and evocative way.
I love that. So now it has a new home, perched on your bookshelf.
You bet. And every time I see it, it makes me smile. It's a reminder of that lucky find, of the artistry of Murano glass. It's just endlessly fascinating.
That's a great story. It shows that these treasures are out there. You just have to keep your eyes open and let curiosity lead the way.
Exactly. That's the whole point of collecting, isn't it? It's about discovery, about constantly exploring beauty and history and craftsmanship. Who knows what other amazing Murano creatures are waiting to be found?
All right, maybe there's a whole flock of birds out there or a school of fish. Well, I think we've given our listeners plenty to think about today and maybe even inspired some new Murano glass enthusiasts.
I hope so. It really is a fascinating world to delve into. So much beauty and history and maybe even a touch of magic.
Well said. Until next time, everyone, happy collecting.